No one has ever escaped from Alcatraz.
When did you get out of Alcatraz?
President Donald Trump has directed officials to rebuild and reopen the notorious Alcatraz prison.
Where did you get the idea for reopening Alcatraz?
Just an idea I've had.
Welcome to Alcatraz.
Welcome to Alcatraz and welcome to Nexus. Today we're looking at President Trump's plan to reopen the infamous prison. You'll notice he's already knocked up a so-called alligator Alcatraz in Florida, and that's grabbing all the headlines at the moment. But today we're talking about the original one just off the coast of San Francisco. And if you've watched the movies, you'll know why this is so interesting. If you haven't, here's a quick report that will bring you up to speed.
Alcatraz stands around 2 kilometers from shore in San Francisco Bay, a tiny wind-lashed and storied island. The Rock, as it's known, has had many guises. From the 1850s, it served the military, first as a fortress with a lighthouse, then as a prison. During the Civil War, it held Confederate sympathizers and Union weapons. But its most infamous chapter began in 1934 when the Department of Justice turned it into a maximum security federal prison. It was meant to be escape-proof. That's why America's worst criminals were sent there, as well as inmates that were deemed too much for other prisons to handle. The names that famously filled the cells include America's most feared mobster Al Capone, mafia hitman Whitey Bulger, notorious kidnapper Machine Gun Kelly, and killer Robert Stroud, known as the Birdman of Alcatraz. He may have been a keen ornithologist, but the truth is he was never allowed to keep birds during his 17 years at the prison. Because like much surrounding Alcatraz, myth and reality do not always meet. Alcatraz was never quite the fortress it was purported to be. In its 29 years as a high-security prison, 36 men attempted to escape. Most were caught, some were killed. But 3, Frank Morris and the ANGLIN brothers, vanished in 1962 with the clever use of plaster dummies. Some believe they made it across the water, but they were never found. The investigation that ensued marked the beginning of the end for Alcatraz as a federal prison. It was clear that salt water had eroded the foundations, the cost of supplying an island prison was ballooning, conditions were inhumane, and cheaper, better prisons were being built on the mainland. And so, on March 23, 1963, it closed.
This is Frank Morris.
Then Hollywood helped build the myth. The story of Morris and the ANGLIN brothers' escape became Escape from Alcatraz, starring Clint Eastwood.
No one has ever escaped from Alcatraz, and no one ever will.
Other classics include The Birdman of Alcatraz, starring Burt Lancaster from 1962.
Well, you keep this in mind. A man ain't whipped until he quits, and I'll never give you that pleasure.
And The Rock, with Nicolas Cage and Sean Connery.
I'm an agent with the FBI.
The real Rock now attracts more than 1 million sightseers a year, and competitive swimmers often cross the water to the mainland. But Trump has floated the idea of stopping the triathletes and tourist ferries and putting criminals back in their cells. Is that even possible?
Well, to answer that question, I'm joined today by Jolene Babyak, an author and historian who actually lived on Alcatraz as a child. Corene Kendrick, the Deputy Director of the ACLU National Prison Project and former guard and warden at Kentucky State Penitentiary. Philip Parker, welcome to the program, everyone. Jolene, I have to say your biography sounds very, very interesting. You were living on the island as a child. Why?
My father worked there for 9 years, and we lived there for a couple of years when I was 7 to 9, and then another year when I was 15 because he'd become the associate warden and we had to be in residence.
Amazing. What was that like growing up on Alcatraz Island?
You know, everybody describes it as ideal. We were away from the prisoners. They were focused on the opposite side of the island. No one was ever hurt. All of the kids went to school in San Francisco. And so we had friends in the city and friends on the island. There were about 75 kids that actually lived on Alcatraz. And I will say that all the adults paid a lot of attention to the kids, both for security reasons and to protect us. So it ended up being an ideal community.
And what was your father's job in the prison, and what sorts of stories would he tell you?
Well, you know, my father was eventually became the director of industries, and industries employed about 100 prisoners, and they made products for the government. and they actually earned money. So he was very proud of that job. And then he became the associate warden, or what you would call the deputy governor. That's why we had to come back to the island the second time. And he was World War II generation, and that generation didn't talk very much. So he did not come down the hill and talk about his day in prison, nor was I all that interested as a girl.
Yeah. So the question at the beginning of the program is something along the lines of, is reopening Alcatraz possible and desirable? What do you think?
You've got a number of big problems. Plumbing and electrical lines are all underground, and the infrastructure has deteriorated significantly. The building itself is compromised. So if you were to rebuild Alcatraz as a prison, you'd have to raise the entire structure and start all over. The other thing is that there are two essential problems. There's no water on Alcatraz, and there's no sewage treatment plant. So the sewage has to be carted off the island, and water has to be carted to the island. Those are very expensive propositions.
But in terms of security, do you think that its position as an island makes it more secure?
No, not really. I mean, there have been island prisons all over the world, South Africa, Robben Island, and Spike Island in Ireland, Devil's Island and Elba and St. Helena in France, and McNeil Island, Washington, and of course Alcatraz. More or less, they've all closed. They're expensive. They don't necessarily offer better security. What you're really talking about is a facility that is governed by officers who are trained to make sure that prisoners don't escape. But essentially, the water it's a deterrent, but it's not that big of a security.
And as you know, it's one of the most famous prisons in the world. You're an author and historian of the prison. Can you put your finger on why it's so memorable?
Al Capone came there in 1934.
Yeah.
But I think, it was a military prison for 70 years prior to being a federal prison, and for U.S. Army prisoners convicted of crimes in the Army. And so all of those men, there were thousands and thousands of men that came through as Army prisoners, and they actually were breaking rock. They were flattening out the hills and putting concrete on them, and then building their own cell house. And so all of them went home and told their parents and their wives and their children about that Devil Rock. And so when Al Capone came there in 1934, when it opened as a federal prison, it was an overnight sensation. That had been growing for 70 years.
Well, for many of us, obviously, the Clint Eastwood film put it on the map, so to speak. Can I ask you about the Anglin brothers and Frank Morris? Did they escape from Alcatraz or not?
Well, certainly they escaped. Did they make it to land and survive for the next 50 or 60 years? Probably not. What you have to remember about Alcatraz is that you didn't come there because of your crimes. You came there because of your behavior. And it was really the top of the pyramid. It was the smallest institution in the system, and it housed the worst behaved prisoners. So when guys like that escape, they tend to take that personality with them, and they tend to get caught. And the fact that there was no evidence on land was really a bad sign.
Philip Parker, you were a guard and a warden. What do you make of using Alcatraz once more as a prison?
It's going to be costly, and there's a lot of challenges, which your last guest said exactly right. You're going to have to import water. You have to take sewage out by barge. So there's a lot of challenges.
Would it be worth it, do you think?
Well, the Federal Bureau of Prisons has a supermax facility in Florence, Colorado. They do an excellent job. There's only 300 or so inmates in that facility. But there's never been escape from that facility. So is it needed? Probably not. But it does send a loud statement that it's all about law and order, harsh conditions. And if you build it, it'll have to be rebuilt. There's no doubt.
Are you saying it would be a useful tool to kind of threaten sort of recidivists with, if you like, because it's an island, because it has a reputation?
Yes, I am saying that it could be reserved for the worst of the worst. And if that is the intent and the way it's going to be managed, then it would definitely have to be rebuilt because it's not secure the way it is now.
Yeah.
And it can't be made secure unless it's rebuilt.
And do you think that its position on an island is helpful to its security?
Well, no, it's more symbolic than anything. There again, the facility they have in Florence, Colorado is the most secure prison in the world. It's going to be hard to top that. I suppose you could go underground at Alcatraz or maybe or build up. But I would, if and it looks like it's going to be done, I would rebuild it and keep it very small and reserve it for the worst of the worst. And by that I mean I would construct it in a way that they couldn't even see San Francisco. I wouldn't let them see. I mean, they wouldn't have windows to be able to see it. I'd keep them isolated with the minimum amount necessary to keep it legal.
Corene Kendrick, Philip is proposing to put the worst of the worst there, and it would be a good deterrent. It will be it will scare them. What do you make of that?
Reopening Alcatraz is an absurd and expensive stunt. It would be practically impossible to reopen those ancient, decrepit buildings as any sort of functional federal prison. What's there now would have to be ripped down to the studs and rebuilt. There's no water, there's no sewage, and there's very limited electricity throughout what remains of the prison. And it's really just another silly idea that's purporting to show how tough Donald Trump is. In a way, it's a joke. And really what we need to stay focused on is the fact that the Trump administration is undermining the constitutional rights of all people in this country, and that the Federal Bureau of Prisons currently is in a crisis with real problems that need attention. The BOP, as it's known, suffers from chronic shortages of prison officers and healthcare staff, widespread violence, overcrowding, and crumbling infrastructure in the prisons that it currently operates. And according to the BOP itself, they shut down Alcatraz in 1963 because it was too expensive to continue operating. It cost more than 3 times as much as any other federal prison at the time. And the population never reached its capacity of 336 prisoners at any given time. And as Mr. Parker just commented, the Bureau of Prisons has long since replaced Alcatraz with modern high security penitentiaries, including the maximum security prison in Florence, Colorado, which BOP itself refers to as the Alcatraz of the Rockies. So there's absolutely no operational reason to reopen Alcatraz. It's completely being floated out there as yet another silly performative idea to make Donald Trump and his administration look tough.
Philip, just a quick one on that. I think you mentioned that it is going ahead. Did you say that?
I think he's going to do it. I mean, from all indications, from what I've seen, I think when he sees the price tag, he may change his mind because your other guests have pointed out it's going to have to be completely rebuilt. There's nothing there that's usable that I've seen in the photographs. So you want to spend $500 million to rebuild it, and operating cost of maybe I don't know, $200 million or more to operate it yearly, or whatever it costs. But it's very, very expensive to operate that prison. Simply because of where it's located. And the staffing. Your other guest said staffing is an issue, and it definitely is. We're having trouble all over the nation finding staff that are willing to work in these kinds of prisons.
Corene, as mentioned by Philip there, it's quite a challenge to get the staff to work in these sorts of prisons. What kind of changes would you recommend?
From the first instance, one way, if you don't have enough staff for the given number of incarcerated people, is you need to look at who is locked up and whether they can be safely released. The Bureau of Prisons has suffered from chronic shortages of prison staff for years, going back to the prior Trump administration. And as a result, the BOP has a policy that they refer to as augmentation, where they force people who are nurses, secretaries, or cooks to actually press them into duty as guards for incarcerated people. The Bureau of Prisons under President Biden started a measure to give extra pay and overtime bonuses to employees that the union for the prison officers had said were helping to retain and attract new staff. During Elon Musk's cost-cutting measures in the past few months, all of those pay bonuses have been eliminated. And so according to the union for the correctional officers in Bureau of Prisons, there's now, again, long overtime shifts and people are quitting because they're so burnt out.
Philip, just before you go, the Epstein files are back in the news. Are they ever out of the news? Just on the supposed suicide of Jeffrey Epstein, how did that happen in that prison?
That should not have happened. That was a failure. That was a failure by security. That's simply incompetence. That should never happen in a high security environment. It was supposed to be under constant observation. So it's just a plain and simple failure to the staff just weren't doing their job. And that's all you can say.
Yeah, did the staff fail to do whatever they were supposed to be doing? Did the cameras break at just the right moment? Or was that, was the security penetrated? Was he killed?
All the above. It was everything. It was just a complete breakdown in security. It just shouldn't have, it just can happen.
Are you saying Epstein was killed? Are you saying Epstein was killed?
No, I'm not saying he was killed. I'm saying that he killed him. Apparently he killed himself, but there were procedures in place to prevent that. He was under constant observation. There was cameras, which we found out later didn't work, but there was it just can't happen if the staff are doing their job.
Yeah. In the more modern prisons that you've mentioned, maximum security prisons, would that be possible or less likely?
Well, it would be possible if unless they're on a suicide watch. If they're on a suicide watch, then it's not possible unless the staff are just simply not doing their job.
Corene Kendrick, Jolene Babyak, and Philip Parker, thank you all very much. Much appreciated. Well, Alcatraz may have struck fear into the hearts of criminals when it was open, but some of today's state-of-the-art maximum security prisons are a whole different proposition.
ADX Florence. Nicknamed the Alcatraz of the Rockies, inmates at this supermax prison in Colorado are kept in solitary confinement 23 hours a day in reinforced concrete cells. Explicitly designed to be escape-proof, the prison features motion detectors, gun towers and 1,400 steel doors. No inmate has escaped it since it opened in 1994. Black Dolphin in Russia, inmates are forbidden from resting or sitting down for 16 hours a day and blindfolded whenever moved. No one has escaped. QINCHENG. Built in 1958 during the Cold War, this prison operates under military-style discipline and is directly controlled by China's top security agencies. It's in a remote and mountainous area with only one road in and out. Prisoners rarely see each other and most legal counsel is reportedly denied. Prisoners are monitored through microphones in their cells and surveillance data is apparently fed back to central intelligence agencies. CECOT, or the Terrorism Confinement Center in El Salvador, has a 40,000 capacity, making it one of the largest in the world. Initially designed to imprison gang members in a crackdown under President Bukele, the prison is now infamous for housing criminals sent from the USA under a recent deal with Trump. The facility has over 600 CCTV cameras, body scanners, AI-assisted monitoring, and there are no visitors allowed. There have been no escapes. BELMARSH. One of Britain's most secure Category A men's prisons, is home to terrorists and gang members. Known for its harsh conditions, the facility boasts an advanced perimeter defence and high staff-to-inmate ratio, with no successful escapes since opening in 1991.
Well, let's bring in our final guest now, and I'm joined by Dr. Robert McCrie, who is an expert on correctional facilities and criminal justice. Welcome to the programme, Dr. McCrie. The President says he wants to put the worst of the worst there. What's your reaction to that?
We don't regard it as a policy. It was a suggestion, a thought not clearly examined because Alcatraz was only open 29 years. It was too expensive to operate. It was not large enough. It had many problems, and it was shut down in 1963. So it's a very popular tourist attraction today there in San Francisco Bay, but it's not likely to pass common sense and be reopened.
We've been looking at some of the more modern prisons around the world, especially the one in El Salvador. What do you make of those? Do you think that is the correct direction in which to go?
Well, the current administration has put persons who are in the country without legitimate reasons for being there. These are not persons who have been adjudicated in our system. Putting them in El Salvador has not been costly. It's cheaper to put prisoners there than it is to leave them in one of the state systems or the federal systems. But still, these are not persons who have been convicted of a crime in the system. So far, all the persons who are there for situations where they've not obeyed immigration policies.
Yeah, that's right. Many of them are said to be Venezuelans who are supposedly linked to the Tren de Aragua gang. They've been sent to El Salvador because that prison is regarded as one of the toughest in the world. But in terms of its qualities as a prison, is that the sort of thing that the United States should be building?
At this moment, the United States is the largest incarcerator in the world. We have 2 million people locked up at this moment, and there's not a desire to see how we can expand on this. In addition to that, we have 2.9 million people on probation and others on parole. So we very much have a commitment to the carceral state. And generally speaking, the concept of enlarging this is not a very attractive one to taxpayers.
Our earlier guest from the ACLU suggested that perhaps too many people in the United States are locked up.
Well, indeed, too many are locked up, even though we have decreased from the high point, which is about 2008 or 09, it's come down steadily, but we're still the major incarcerator in the world on a population adjusted basis or on an absolute basis than any other industrialized country, or any country with over 100 million people.
The Epstein files are back in the news. I mean, they're hardly ever out of the news. And of course, central to that story is the supposed suicide of Jeffrey Epstein inside one of New York's most infamous prisons. Is that an indicator, the fact that he was able to commit suicide while he was on suicide watch, amazingly, is that an indicator that America's prisons do need to be modernized, overhauled, and they actually need more staff?
It was a really disappointing indication of management of the Federal Bureau of Prisons when Epstein was able to commit suicide under the circumstances that he did. This is a prison, I emphasize it as a federal prison. It's not a state or a local jail. And the Federal Bureau of Prisons simply didn't manage his care adequately.
Dr. McCrie, for your research, obviously you visit prisons around the world. What lessons can be learned?
A prison can be a place for transformation, personal transformation. It can be a place for learning work skills, for learning good habits, for dealing with drug issues, for dealing with mental health problems. Other prison systems do that to a far higher degree of success than we do in the United States.
In which countries do you find the most successful such programs?
The Scandinavian countries are exemplars, but also northern Germany has a very enlightened prison system where the whole essence of imprisonment is to prepare people for successful entry after they are released, having served their time. But in Asia, while the prisons are quite different, there's a great success in Japan, in South Korea, and in Singapore.
I noticed that the Trump administration is not waiting for Alcatraz to put the worst of the worst. They're already detaining some people in Guantanamo Bay. What do you make of that?
In fact, they are detaining at least 48,000 people who have not been convicted of a crime, but have been overstayed their right to be in the United States. We are a nation that loves immigrants, but we like people to be vetted as part of their entry and their ability to remain in our country.
Dr. McCrie, thank you so much for that. Really appreciate it. And thank you at home and on your phones for watching. If you want to see this episode or any of our previous episodes again, do go to our channel on YouTube. Just type in Nexus TRT World. Till next week, then, goodbye.